If you're a fan of 8-bit Megaman games, then you're fully aware of just how difficult it can be to find games in that playstyle that don't suck. Modern consoles have received similar games, such as the Mighty Gunvolt series, 20XX, and Mighty No. 9, but these games cater more to the 16-bit Mega Man X style games. The recently released Mega Man 11 attempted to capture that old magic, but gimmicky new features and gameplay that didn't feel quite right to me turned me off to that game. I just couldn't get into it. So, when I saw a news story from Bob of Retro RGB about Trophy, a brand new action platformer from the 6502 collective, it piqued my curiosity. As of my writing this, the game is still in the crowdfunding stage over on Kickstarter with just over $27,000 pledged of a $65,002 goal. The campaign will end on April 6th, but prospects look good, with funding ending on April 6th and the game being virtually 100% complete. Now, how do I know that the game is practically complete? So Goose Games, a part of the 6502 collective, provided me with a review copy of Trophy, which I happened to play through all the way to the end. These are my honest thoughts on Trophy in its current form. No one is approving or sponsoring this review, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Now, let's get on with Trophy for the NES. Let me begin by stating the not so obvious. While Trophy may be touted as a clone of the 8-bit Mega Man titles, it's not. It's more of an homage to the classic 8-bit NES Capcom games as a collective. For example, although you can choose your stage order, you do not gain new abilities from defeating bosses, which is the heart of a Mega Man game. That doesn't mean that you don't get new abilities at all. Trophy just takes a different path by hiding power-ups throughout certain levels in a manner similar to Metroid or Capcom's DuckTales. In terms of gameplay, you'll be in control of a cyborg named Trophy that runs, jumps, shoots, and climbs. The controls are tight and they feel great. They aren't floaty in the least outside of the reduced gravity in the water stages, which makes sense. Its controls are very similar to Capcom titles of old. No matter what the game throws at you, you will never feel that you lost due to fighting with the controls. The game also features a life bar, so you will be able to absorb some damage before you die in most circumstances. There are a total of 9 stages, and in my build, I discovered 3 life bar extender power-ups and 1 weapon power-up hidden throughout the first 8 stages. The weapon power-up turns Trophy a golden hue and makes his shots about twice as powerful with much better range. The downside is that once you lose a certain amount of life, your weapon will downgrade back to stock until you regain enough life to turn back gold. You'll also notice that certain enemy sprites will mimic Trophy's color. I'm not sure if this was by design or some kind of a technical limitation. It's not a negative in any way, just an observation. There are some brief sections of the game that experience slowdown while you traverse them. This happened on both my original hardware and FPGA clones, even if I turned on extra sprites. If you're an NES fan, then you know that this is a way of life with this console. It's distracting, but honestly, it did not take away any fun from the game in my experience. What did take away from the experience were certain sections of the game where there are cheap hits that are nearly unavoidable. For example, this section here in the ice level when enemy drops on your head. There are some off-screen enemies that drop on your head while you attempt to climb a ladder. And finally, a few leaps of faith with insta-death as a consequence if you haven't memorized the level. Remember the Quickman stage from Mega Man 2 or the spiky sections from Bubble Man stage? Get ready to relive that frustration. The bosses are huge by general NES standards and are mixed bags in terms of strategy. Most of them are pretty straightforward to figure out after a few tries, although one in particular, the boss of the quarry stage, seems to depend on pure luck. I mentioned it to the dev and they are aware of the issue and are working to resolve it before release. Another minor complaint is that most of the bosses seem to have huge amounts of life, especially when you're reduced to using the basic weapon. This may feel more balanced once the final most powerful weapon is added to the game, but for now, I feel that a life reduction of 10 to 15% would make the bosses a little more balanced. Under the current design, the final boss of the game is truly a test of endurance as it has two forms. The first, which flies off the screen and out of your range repeatedly, making the battle take way too long with the amount of damage that it can also absorb. Once you beat that form, the second form is a far more enjoyable and satisfying battle that tests your skill and your reflexes. Unfortunately, if you die while fighting the boss in either form, you'll have to start all over again from scratch. The visual representation of Trophy is great, with the main character having some nice smooth animation and a nicely drawn sprite. Each stage is thematically different, with some featuring animated tiles and parallax scrolling, along with bosses that are huge by NES standards. Most of the enemies are full of personality and would fit right in with older Megaman or Capcom titles in both their art style and behaviors. That said, there are sections of the game that could benefit from a few basic touch-ups to give them more life. For example, the forest stage looks great, but adding a few falling leaves or animation to some of the foliage would go a long way in giving the forest more life. In the asteroid stage, having the background stars twinkle in and out randomly would also add some life to this world while you make your way through. The static clouds in the carnival stage would benefit from parallax or some animation to make the sky background come to life. And finally, I like to see some color cycling or twinkling on the blocks of ice and background of the ice stage, similar to what the Flashman stage did in Megaman 2. The furnace boss and helicopter enemies could also use some tweaking as they look really basic compared to the many other sprites in the game. Overall, Trophy is a good looking 8-bit game even without my suggested tweaks, but adding those little quality of life touches would really put it over the top in my opinion. I'm happy to say that the sound in this game is great. The tunes would fit in well with many of Capcom and Konami's classic games. A few had me bopping my foot as I played, while others may not be as catchy but managed to fit in well. The sound effects have those classic metallic Mega Man clangs and thumps, and they're all pretty satisfying. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here as the music is always a subjective area, but nevertheless it's composed very well, fits in thematically, and holds up very well technologically when compared to its peers in recent homebrew as well as the retail games from the original 8-bit era. My current build even has a song select after you finish the game, which is pretty awesome. Hopefully the developers leave this in and add a code to access this once you finish the game, or they add it to the title screen as an option. The pricing for Trophy ranges from $10 for an NES ROM with Steam key to $100 for a limited edition with a complete in-box NES card option and extra goodies. The $50 and $60 tiers will get you either a plain cart or a complete in-box option. I personally plan to put my money where my mouth is and pick up a complete in-the-box option. If you're going the ROM only route, then I can verify that the ROM file works on an EverDrive and an original NES, Retro USB AVS, and even the original Super Retro Trio. I also wanted to test the Retron 5, so I patched the ROM file to an IPS format that the Retron 5 was able to read, and the game worked fine for me. That said, please keep in mind that this is a hacky workaround and the actual cart may or may not work on the Retron 5 if that is your sole system. This test was just to appease my curiosity. Overall, Trophy is shaping up to be an excellent game and a must-have for NES collectors. Homebrews can be hit or miss, and I'm happy to say that I genuinely enjoyed this despite the few flaws that I mentioned. Considering that the game is virtually complete and that the 6502 Collective has already had experience bringing physical games such as Gradual Games' Legend of Aulia and Retrotainment's Haunted Halloween series to market, I feel comfortable giving this game a recommend. For more information, please check my description below. As always, thanks for watching and feel free to leave your comments and questions below. Don't forget to thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you enjoyed this content. Once again, this is Recommend, signing out, and I'll see you guys next video.